You've ordered your baby chicks, but now what? You need a brooder. Today we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of a brooder, what it is, what other the tools and things you need inside that brooder to make sure that those baby chicks have the best start in life. Let's get growing. Hello and welcome to the Pray Just Plant podcast, the show that talks about growing a garden, a homestead, a healthy family, and most importantly, growing closer to God. I'm your host, Crystal Media, owner of the Red Ridge Farm Homestead, where our mission is to help women of faith find the courage to grow healthy food for their family while building a closer relationship with our Lord and Savior. If that's you. Don't let the world hold you back. Pray, just plant. Welcome to the Pray Just Plant podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Media, and today in Season 7, Episode 1, we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of a chick brooder or a brooder. It can be called many different things, but we're going to talk about what you need inside that brooder to ensure that those baby chicks have their best start. Temperature, what is it, water, a few tips there in helping make sure that they get their best nutrients like probiotics and more. So let's start with, what is a brooder? A brooder is essentially a home or a place. It could be a purchase brooder that keeps baby chicks warm. It's a draft-free location with proper ventilation and access to clean water and appropriate feed and protection for those baby chicks. A brooder is going to be a house or a home or a part of your basement or an area in your shed that is going to keep your baby chicks safe. Because what you're doing is you're trying to imitate mama. You're trying to imitate having that hen. And what she does for the chicks is she keeps them warm. She teaches them how to access water. She teaches them how to access feed. And you are going to be doing the same things, especially on that first day. We're going to be talking about that as well. What are some tips that you can do that first day to ensure that your baby chicks have their best start? So let's talk about the brooder first. Now, sometimes when you're reading an article about a brooder, some hatcheries call the heat unit that they use inside of their building or of the area where they're keeping their baby chicks, they call that the brooder. Some people, like myself, in several books that I've read, they talk about the whole area as being the brooder, not just the heat source. The heat source is the heat source. So when you're looking at brooders online, maybe you want to purchase a brooder, it could be just a flat, I know Pier 1, and I'll put the link in the description, has a brooder that sits a couple inches off of the ground and the baby chicks go underneath it, and they call that itself a brooder. So the word brooder can mean several things, but here in this episode we're going to be talking about a brooder is all of the things inside of the certain area that your baby chicks need those first 6 weeks so that they get that good start. Now there's many ideas of what you can do. We have used a water tank, we've used a plastic water tank, we've used a metal water tank, we have used those clothes storage bins, we have used just a corner that has been boxed in of our shed. It's actually a large room that we do our meat chickens in now. Essentially, there's lots of different things that you can use for a brooder, but your brooder is going to need certain requirements. You're going to need to make sure that you're having adequate space, and you're going to, of course, have to have that heat source and proper ventilation. So what about space? Well, if you're only getting a few chicks, like maybe 10, how much space do they need? Or what if you're going and really expanding and you're doing some meat chickens and you're getting 100 of them? How much space do you need? But these are some guidelines. You're going to need at least 6 to 4 square inches for each baby chick. Then you're going to need to have room for the water, depending on how large a size that you need. You're going to need to have room for the heat. But then you're also going to need to have room for those baby chicks to get away from the brooder or the heat source or underneath the heat source so that they can move freely in this area. When we had our chicks, we had a few turkeys. Baby turkeys are about the size of a chick. We're talking about any type of chicks. We're talking about ducks, all of these things are raised in a brooder. We had a 2-foot by 3-foot little tub. By the time we got the water in there, the feed in there, and the light on, they only had enough room right underneath the heat source and maybe just a few places to step on the outside. We only had 2 baby chicks in that area. So when you are thinking of the size of your brooder, you need to be thinking of all of the things that your chicks are going to need, and also space away from the heat source so that they can not get too hot. And we're going to talk about the temperature of the heat source in just a few minutes. But right now we're talking about the size of your facility that you are going to be blocking off for a brooder. What type of pen you're going to be using, or what type of barrel or tank, or what size you're going to need. Now, when we had 20, say, baby chicks, we had a 2-foot by 6-foot tank, water tank, and it was about 2 foot tall. And we had the heat source on one side, we had the water on the other side, and we had the food in the middle. This was plenty of room for about 20 chicks. We now currently, our brooder is a 5 by 6 corner of our shed. We also had room for multiple feeders, and we can put up to 60 or 70 chicks in that area. So depending on how many chicks you're getting, or how big your feed and how big your water is going to need for the amount of chicks you're going to need, is going to help give you that area that your whole brooder can be. So if you are going to have, say, 100 chicks, their first 0 to 4 weeks on feeding space, they're going to need at least 2 or 3 feet to be able to everyone to get up to the trough and eat. So that means your brooder is going to need to be bigger than that to contain that size of feeder. When they're 4 to 8 weeks, they're going to need 20 linear feet. This is 100 chicks, right? So if you break that down, you're thinking that each chick is going to need at least 5 or 6 inches to get up to the feeder and eat. That's meaning that your brooder, the area that contains your chicks, as well as the feed for your chicks, needs to be big enough to house that, as well as a water, as well as your heat source. So, and also room for them to get away from their heat source. So on average, you're thinking about 6 to 7 inches square foot, because you're going to be, when they're first little tiny babies, they're going to have a lot more room to run around. But as they grow, depending on what breeds you have, they're going to have to stay longer in the brooder. Now, that all depends on the hardiness of your breed, or what kind of low temperatures that they can take. Usually I wait until my whatever breed I'm growing is completely feathered out before they come out of the brooder. Does that mean that they will have the light on or the heat source on all of that time? No, because it all depends on the temperature of your brooder, or the temperature that your chicks need. And we're going to be talking about that in a moment, because as chicks grow, they're going to need a certain temperature, and as they get older, they begin to get feathers, they begin to make their own heat. Now it is time for the tips and tricks segment of this episode, where I share a few bonus tips and tricks I use here at Red Ridge Farm. This week's tip is brought to you by the Planning Beyond the Harvest handbook. This handbook was designed to help you get your harvest onto your family's plates. We grow all this delicious food, and sometimes in the garden planning, we forget about the harvest and beyond the harvest. This workbook will walk you through the 5 steps that I use to get beyond the harvest. You can grab your copy at redridgefarm.org/resources. Today, I want to talk about the benefits of a fall garden. There are several, up to 7 benefits that I'm going to be sharing with you in a full podcast episode, but I want to hit on one today. One major benefit of a fall garden is that you get to extend your season. So what is a fall garden? Well, a fall garden is a garden that is successionally planted after your spring and summer garden. So what is a spring garden? Well, a spring garden is things that are cold hardy that you plant in the spring, usually before your last frost. Then you have your summer garden. That's what you're going to plant all your tomatoes, usually after your last frost, so that those heat-loving plants will survive well and not be frosted or be too cold for them. After your heat-warming plants have grown to harvest and you are pulling them from the bed, a fall garden is the next planting. Is a fall garden planted in the fall? No, it's not, but it will extend your season. So let me give you an example of a fall garden planting. So in the spring, I planted some peas in my bed. Then those peas grew and grew through the spring into early summer, and they came to harvest, and it's probably about midsummer now. I can go ahead and plant a summer crop here, or I can plant a crop that will go completely into fall or just before my first frost of the year. So I could choose a very quick growing summer crop, like say I want to put radishes in 30 days until my radishes are ready to harvest. And then I pull those out. Well, I still have growing room, so I could put a third crop in, and maybe I want to plant some kale that will not only grow through a little bit of the summer, but actually go into the fall and be harvested in the fall because they are a cool growing crop. And you can choose that if you have only a short amount of time because you're going more quickly into the fall. Now, if I were to do something like, you could even do a fall growing of tomatoes. A fall garden is essentially anything that you are trying to plant after a spring or summer garden, but it doesn't always have to be cold, hardy things. It can be if you want it to go beyond your first frost date. But if you don't need it to, if it's something like radishes or lettuce or something that you can just extend, maybe you only have 4 weeks before your last frost date. So you, instead of not planting anything there, you could even do a cover crop in this area, or you can find something that will grow and come to harvest in about 4 weeks. So a benefit of a fall garden is to extend your season, to get more abundance out of the garden. And I have a tool coming in just a couple weeks that is going to help you plan and plant a fall garden. So be on the lookout for that. So back to talking about what are the fundamental necessities of a chick brooder. Now we talked about what a brooder is. We talked about this, that a brooder can be essentially anything as long as it has the 5 essential things that your baby chicks need, like bedding, water, feed, and warmth, but also when deciding on what your area that you're going to be keeping all of these 5 essential things in, because protection is one of those 5 essentials. We need to protect those baby chicks from predators like rats or anything, but most importantly, keeping them warm. We need a space that gives them adequate area to grow for their first 4 to 6 weeks. It all depends on what kind of breed you have. They're going to stay in that brooder until they have their feathers, because a brooder's essential task is to keep those baby chicks warm. So let's talk about bedding, and we are going to get to heat source, I promise, but I want to talk about bedding first. You want to use a very good absorbent litter material for bedding, especially if you're using something like a tub or something that could be slick. You want to make sure that your baby chicks have lots of, one, absorption because all the poo and urine that's going to be happening. But bedding is also where you can help give a little cushion, give a little protection to your chicks' legs. It can also be bedding, a place for them to nestle down and stay warm. The litter should also be clean, free of mold, and dry, but not dusty. Litter may be any absorbent material that controls the moisture and serves as an insulating material in cold weather. A lot of options that we use here at the farm are pine shavings, straw. The biggest thing is you want to make sure that there is something on the ground to help insulate the floor for your baby chicks, because especially out in our shed, we have the floor that is the floor of the shed is the floor of our brooder. That also means that the floor of our brooder may be a little bit cooler, but having bedding that will hold heat not too much heat, but it'll hold a little bit of heat for your baby chicks is definitely going to help out. Now here in Wyoming, if we want to start our meat chickens on time or even get our layer chickens, we have to start them in the brooder way before our last frost, meaning that we're going to have fairly cool temperatures. So in my brooder, I'm going to have a deeper layer of bedding. We also do a deep mulch bedding in our brooder, meaning that we don't clean out our brooder throughout the season. We just add more bedding. This also creates more heat from below. As that begins to ferment and decompose, it'll add a little bit more heat through that growing season. Now, if we try and do, a few years ago, we did a later summer batch of chicks. We were hatching some of our own out, and we found that we didn't need as thick a layer of shavings because it's warmer. They didn't even need the heat lamp as long, and we're going to talk about heat source in just a moment. But having a bedding is going to do multiple things for your baby chicks. It's going to help bring all of the anaerobic or pee smells. It's going to help absorb those. So that's going to be better for your bird's lungs while they are baby chicks, because they're going to poo, they're going to pee, they're going to create a mess. And having a bedding system that will absorb that and keep it away from your chicks so that they don't inhale it. Also for you too, you're not inhaling that nitrogen that is coming off of their feces. It's actually being absorbed into the bedding. And even adding fresh layer of bedding is going to hide the lower layer of bedding that may be saturated. It's just going to keep your baby chicks away from those types that type of environment. And it also will help control moisture in your poultry house. One of the biggest things before we moved to a hanging waterer is our shed was not perfectly level. It would drain off one side if we didn't prop it up just right. So having the bedding in there helped absorb that so that our baby chicks weren't just standing in water. That's the quickest way to cool your baby chicks down. So bedding is very important. Speaking of water, that's our next most important thing. All animals, everyone needs moisture. They need water. Baby chicks eat water right away. So having a water in that area in your brooder available to them is important. Now, you also don't want to have your water too deep. Only maybe an inch deep is sufficient. This is going to make sure that if a baby chick, which they will, gets into the water, they will not drown. We have had this happen before when we accidentally purchased a water that was just a little bit too deep. Now, our solution for that was we put some marbles in the bottom of it, and you can do this with any water if you feel that it might be too deep. You can put just a small layer of pebbles in the bottom of it. You know, you want big enough pebbles. That's why I suggest marbles so that they don't grab them and choke on them. But this is going to allow that if a baby chick steps into that water, they're not going to go all the way to the bottom of the water. They're going to just be in a few inch, a very probably half inch of water, depending on how deep your water is. Now, another side tip, and I've shared this before in the tips and tricks segment, is that having nutrients in your water for those first couple days or even the first week is very important. Now, you can get electrolytes from who you are purchasing your chicks from. Most hatcheries sell them, but an easy solution from home is that you can use 3 things. Honey is a great electrolyte. It has a little bit of sugar. It also has a little bit of immune system boost in it. So just a couple tablespoons of honey added to a gallon water is going to bring that to your baby chicks. Also garlic. Taking a clove of garlic and squishing it is going to help prevent sickness. Garlic is a natural immune booster and also kills germs. The next thing is vinegar. Vinegar is also used to kill germs. We can drink it. We have vinegar dressings for our salads. Vinegar is also a immune boosting component as well. So by putting these 3 things, like a splash of vinegar, 1 or 2 cloves of garlic squished, tablespoon or a teaspoon of honey, mix it in the water, you are giving those same electrolyte benefits to your chicks instead of having to purchase one of those electrolyte packets from your hatchery. And it's perfectly fine to do that, but if you want an organic or just something that's easier for you on the budget, then the honey and garlic and vinegar, apple cider vinegar is my favorite, is the best to do. Now, I do caution you that if you are using a metal waterer, you probably don't want to use the vinegar because the vinegar will have a natural reaction with the metal. It's the same with when you're doing pickles. You just don't make pickles in anything but stainless steel if you're using metal. Plastic's okay, but stainless steel is what you need. Now, if you're using any aluminum or galvanized metals, the vinegar is going to cause a reaction and it may taint the water. So just be aware of that as well. Now for feed. What do we feed these baby chicks? Well, it all comes down to the type of feed, at least, is going to depend on the type of baby chick that you have. If you are doing a meat chick, they're going to start out with, for the first week, probably a crumble, and then you're going to be moving them onto a meat chick feed. If you're starting out with layer chicks, then you're going to continue that chick crumble for at least until they begin to get all of their feathers. They don't need the high protein that a meat bird is going to need, but they also don't need the calcium that you find in layer chick. Layer chick feed, there's usually just a little bit too much until they get all their feathers. That's when you can start switching them over to the layer chick feed to help them develop that store of calcium that they need in their bodies to lay eggs. Now, as for a feeder, this is going to depend on how many chicks you have. We like to use a circular feeder, and I'll have a picture of it in the show notes, that is a self-feeding feeder. We also have used the long trays. I don't like the trays with the little holes in it, and I'll show you that picture as well in the show notes. It's really hard for me to describe it to you in your earbuds, so please go over and check out the show notes to see that picture. But it's usually a tray, and there's a little lid that sits on top of it, and the little lid has little circular holes that the baby chick is supposed to put their head through. Now, if you can't find anything except for those two attached, that's fine. But those baby chicks will outgrow that within 2 weeks. You're going to have to remove the top, and what that is going to do is they'll be able to now stand on their feed and scratch in their feed and poo on their feed. So having a automatic feeder is going to be a little bit more efficient for you because it's going to keep it up off the ground, for one, because you can hang it, and number two, there is something even we use for our adult chickens, so it's going to be big enough through their whole lifespan. Now, meat chickens, I've always fed them in a trough because that's how I feed them out when we get them out on our grass. We have trough feeders, so they're always fed in that trough type. But instead of the ones with the little holes on top of it, we do the ones that have a bar that goes across it. So when the little baby chick goes to climb up on the feed, they hit this bar and it twists, and they can't stay on top of it. It kind of pushes them gently out of the feeder, and then they're not getting poo. There's always going to be some poo, but they're not going to be getting as much poo as they would if you just had an open tray. So forgive me for having to try to explain those, but please go to the show notes and look at those pictures. I'm going to have the 3 pictures of the different feeders that you can use, but you want to also make sure that you have plenty of room for your baby chicks to get to. So if you have usually the little plastic feeders, they're usually about 2 to 3 inches wide and about 15 inches long. If you have 10 chicks, then 1 will work. If you have 20 chicks, then you're going to have to get 2. Make sure that you're getting enough for how many chicks you have. When we have our meat chickens in there, we raise about 30 or 40 at a time. We have a longer one, and they have bigger ones that you can use for in the brooder and also out in the grass. And I will definitely show you pictures of those in the show notes. So what are the show notes? Well, down below this podcast episode where you read what this podcast episode was about, that's the description. And I can only give you so many words there, and I can't really share pictures. So the show notes are where I've either wrote a blog post about this, or it's just a place where there's more links and more pictures, and where you can go deeper into learning about this subject, about brooding or raising chicks. It's just a place for you to learn more and expand your knowledge on the topic we're talking about. So make sure that you are getting the proper size of feeder for your flock. But now it is time for the Growing with God segment of this episode, where you and I dive into the Bible and build that relationship with our Lord and Savior. This season 7, we're going to be talking about strength, how the Lord can give us strength, or how strong He is that we have something strong to depend upon. So today we're reading Psalms 121, 1 through 2. And if you'd like to read with me, I'm reading from the NIV translation. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. I know when I look up at the mountains here on our property, I can see the strength that they have. And I think, how can I be that strong? How can I ever try to bring that strength to myself? And then I remember, well, the Lord made those mountains. He made them strong. And He makes me strong in the same way. He builds me up. He fills me. He gives me the strength I need for the everyday world. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. They're a reminder of how strong our Lord is. Where does my help come from? They're a reminder of who is helping me. My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. Many times in this day and age, especially with social media, we try to look for strength. We try to find someone that we can either look up to, or we can find something to build us up, to give us the strength to face every day. And sometimes we'll hear a great quote from someone, or we will see someone doing good acts. And that's good. That's something to help build our strength. But that is also fleeting. Nature outside is there to be seen every single day. Now, you might read a good quote and then you are in a weak moment and you're trying to find that quote again, but it's easier to step outside and breathe in that clean air and see the trees and see the blue skies and see the grass growing. And if you have mountains near you, see the mountains soaring high, and remembering that it's our Lord that built those. And He wants to build you just as He built those mountains. He is the maker of heaven and earth. He is the maker of you. And He wants to help you. He is the strength that you need, that you can depend on. A strength that is not fleeting. A strength that is always there. So I just want to remind you this today, to lift up your eyes to God, to the mountains, to the trees, to your growing journey. Where does your help come from? Your help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. So we've talked about what a brooder is. We've talked about what size of brooder you need, bedding, water, feed, and I promised we would talk about a heat source. So what is the purpose of a heat source in a brooder? Or in some hatcheries or some articles that you read, the brooder is the heat source. What is its purpose? Its purpose is to warm your chicks, just like mama hen would warm her chicks. If you watch birds in nature, any birds, the mama lays the eggs. She keeps the eggs warm. We replace this in our human world with an incubator. The baby chicks hatch. Mama stays on the nest until all are hatched. We keep the incubator closed until all are hatched. And then we move the baby chicks to the brooder. In nature, the mama begins to move around and takes her baby chicks to food. She takes her baby chicks to water. But as soon as they get a little bit cold, she fluffs up her feathers. She brings her body up just a little bit. The baby chicks get underneath her feathers, and she doesn't quite sit on top of them, but she kind of hovers and keeps them warm. And that's the purpose of a brooder, or the area of a brooder. We're trying to make sure that these baby chicks have a safe place, because the other thing Mama does is she fights off any predators to protect her baby chicks. So we also need to do that as well. And we're going to talk about predator protection in a little bit, and like what kind of predators we need to be worrying about. In that area of a brooder, we provide the water, we provide the feed, we provide the bedding to keep them warm. Now we need to provide the heat source. Now, in that first week of having your babies, you're going to need to keep that area, at least provide an area in your brooder that is 95 degrees Fahrenheit, especially in the winter, 9 degrees in the summer, just depending on how efficiently your brooder or space that you have your heat source keeps heat. Then as your baby chicks grow, you are going to be able to reduce the heat by 5 degrees every week. So essentially, when I am raising my meat chickens or raising any baby chicks, we start out with the brooder on all the time. And so that they can, and I'm talking about the heat source, not the brooder, we have it on all the time. As the baby chicks grow and as they develop, they need a cooler area. Now, our shed that we have them in is very well insulated. So as they grow and get bigger, they themselves begin to create heat. So during the day, especially if it's warm outside, we'll shut off the light or the heat source and let them be, as long as it is still staying above the temperature they need for that stage of their life. So if we start at 90 degrees for the first week, the next week would be 85. The next week would be 80. The next week would be 70. The next week would be 75. If the temperature outside is 75, that's plenty of heat to keep that brooder, your area that you're doing your baby chicks, warm. So having this heat source is going to depend on your baby chicks and how old they are, and also the circumstances that you are in. But you do want to make sure that first week that they do have access to this heat source. Now, does that mean that they need to be always underneath the heat source? No. Just like with Mama, they're going to run out away from the heat source to go get their food, go get their water, and when they feel a little cold, they'll return to the heat source. Now, that is just how warm it needs to be directly underneath the brooder, underneath the heat source. But the whole area needs to have a minimum of 65 degrees. You don't want to have 30 degrees way out here where they're running by their feed. So you still need to have the whole area be at least a minimum of 65 degrees. We usually try to raise our baby chicks indoors for the first couple of weeks, or just depending on the temperature outside. If we get baby chicks and it's still 65 degrees all day long, then that's perfectly fine. Now, if it's early April and we're still getting below temperatures at night, below freezing temperatures at night, then we add an additional heat lamp that's a little higher just to keep the room itself warm. So you need to be thinking about that. Another way to gauge how warm your area is, if you're not really wanting to say, oh, we need it 65 degrees or 75 degrees, is you monitor your chicks. If your chicks seem comfortable, if they seem like they're living life to the best, then that heat lamp is as low as it needs to be. Now, if they're crowded over into the corner underneath the heat and they're not really venturing over to get water or feed, then they're too cold. They're wanting to stay under their heat. And if that heat lamp itself isn't enough, I'll explain a heat lamp in just a minute. If it's not giving enough heat, they'll begin tweeping and being really annoying, and it's almost like a chicken alarm is going off. Then they're definitely too cold. So you just need to lower the heat source so that it'll bring more warmth to the area that they are. So I've been mentioning a heat lamp. Now I'm going to include a picture of this in the show notes, so be sure to check this out. But a heat lamp usually is a metal kind of lamp shade, but it's metal. And then you have your bulb up inside of it. And it's usually a red infrared light so that it gives off more heat than just light. Because your wand is going to be on all day and all night. So you're not wanting the baby chicks to be filled with, have the sun up all the time. So you use a red infrared, but they have specific ones. So when you're getting your baby chicks, you'll know exactly what they are. They're usually right next, the bulb is usually right next to the heat lamp when you are purchasing them. The bulb itself gets inside there. The metal shade of the lamp is metal because it reflects the heat and light down. It also, because it's creating heat, makes anything else that close to the lamp may get too warm and catch on fire. So plastic is never used. And you will also need to be thinking about that when you are doing your brooder to make sure that your metal of the heat lamp is not touching anything that can start on fire. So that is a worry when you are raising your baby chicks. So just be thinking about that as well. So just remember that they are going to need a certain temperature, and you can easily gauge how well they're doing by how they're acting. So always that first day, be checking on them. So the next thing you're going to need is predator. You're going to have to think about predators, especially if you're going to be having a brooder that is out of your home or even in your home. We have had a few years ago, we got a new cat, and we didn't even think about having the baby chicks down there because for years and years, we've always had baby chicks, but the cat decided he wanted to jump in there. And thank the Lord, we saw him do it, and we had to re-improvise our brooder and put a cover over the top. This is when we had a metal horse tank that we were using. So we got a few panels of wiring and put over the top of it, and the cat stayed out. Now we've also had one of our dogs actually indoors. He got one of a couple of our turkey chicks because these were totally something new to him, and we never ever thought that he would do something. So you got to also think that even your pets can be predators to these little baby chicks. They're very tiny. But if you have them outdoors in the shed, you're going to be having to think about mice, rats, and we recently had a fox come in and get my son's baby turkeys. We've had a skunk come in and get eggs and baby chicks. So you need to be thinking about those type of protections as well. So having a protected place. We had to think about when we first did our brooder just in the shed and we hadn't built in our secure room that we have in the back now. We had the horse tank just there in the middle of the shed, but we had a cat door that was allowing our cats to come in and out. The cat herself wasn't bothering our baby chicks, but we then realized, thank the Lord, nothing got in, but it was like, should we really have this cat door that has access for maybe a skunk or something else to get in and access our baby chicks? So those are some things you're just going to have to think about when you are creating this brooder or this safe place for your baby chicks. So let's talk about what you do on that first day or what you need to be doing before you get your baby chicks. I personally, if I know my baby chicks are coming the next day or a couple days from now, I go and get my brooder ready. I go and get all the supplies that we need at least a week before, because you never know, they might show up early. Get all of your bedding ready, your chick feed ready, your feeders ready, and get them set up in the brooder. Do you need to turn the light on yet? Probably not. Do you need to put the water in the waterer yet? Probably not. But as long as you have everything ready, then you'll be ready to go on the day that your chicks arrive. Even have all the things that you plan to put in the water ready. If you have the electrolytes coming with the baby chicks, then you're set. Now, the day that the chicks arrive. Now, if you order these from the mail or you're going to your local farm store, you want to make sure that you get that brooder warmed up so that when those baby chicks arrive, they're coming to a warm home. Because if you've gone to the feed store, they have been underneath those lights. They're going to go into a little box right in your car all the way home, and you need to have that area prepared for them. Now, if they're coming in the mail, they would have hatched and been counted and put in your box and put in the mail, and it could take up to 3 days, which is perfectly okay for the baby chicks because usually the hatchery provides some type of food, but they're also still absorbing some of the nutrients from the egg that they just hatched out of. But when they get to your home, when you go to the post office to get them and bring them home, they're going to be experiencing a little bit more stress. So having that brooder ready for them, the lights on, the heat, the bedding all warm, the heat ready for them, the water ready for them, the feed ready for them, it's going to help the stress of your baby chicks. Because another thing that you want to do as soon as you get your baby chicks and you're unloading them from the box is before you let them loose, you have to act like mama bird. You have to take them and just dip their little head in the water a little bit and put it next to the feed and put them down. Then you get the next baby chick, you dip their head in the water a little bit, put their head next to the feed, put them down, put their head, and I think you see what I'm saying. But you need to show the baby chicks where all of these things are. And you need to be monitoring them. So if a baby chick just didn't get it that that's where the water is, you need to be monitoring them at least every hour for that first day so that you are reminding the baby chick where the food is, you're reminding them where the water is, and you're also going to be looking for at least the first 2 or 3 days pasty butt. And pasty butt is where the baby chick has been under stress, and sometimes when they get into that new feed, they're going to get a little plug on their bottom that just like a new poo can be a little bit more sticky. You're going to be watching for and make sure that those little things come off of their bum. It's also going to, if you have too much pasty butt, it only happens on a couple of them, you're probably okay. But if all of them seem to be getting a lot of pasty butt, that means that something is bothering them in their feed source, or something is not agreeing with them and they're getting upset stomachs and could have a bacteria in the water or the feed. So be sure that you're checking for those things. Let's do a recap. What is a brooder? Well, there's many definitions of a brooder. Some magazines say a brooder is just that heat source. I personally, in many books that I've read, said the brooder is the whole area that the baby chicks are raised in, the area that includes their feed and a warm place to be and their water and protection from the environment. Because to me, a brooder is we're trying to imitate mom. And mom does all those things. They provide food, they provide water, they provide warmth. Bedding is provided by mom's feathers herself and the nest that she builds. And also they move around a lot, so they're not always pooing in the same place. You're going to need all those 5 things in your brooder. You're going to need bedding, you're going to need water source, water, put a little nutrients in that water. You're going to need feed, a feeder. You're going to need a heat source. It can be a heat lamp, where you can look up different heated brooders online. You're going to need protection from the environment, like rats if you're outside, mice, pets if you're inside, and even young children. Teaching them how to care for the baby chicks is important, and how to hold them and care for them. A couple days before you get your baby chicks, get ready. Get everything organized. Get all of your things in your home or on your farm, on your homestead, so that you are ready for those baby chicks. And then the day of, get the brooder turned on. Get the water filled up. Get the feeder full. Turn on the heat source just before you leave to go get your baby chicks. I want to thank you for joining me today here at the Pray Just Plant podcast. If this is your first time, I want to welcome you to our community of fellow growers. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me on my website. The link is in the description below. And as always, don't let the world hold you back. Pray, just plant.